Well, hello, hello. It is, let's see, what is the day? It's October the 21st. And
That's right.
Thursday evening, we're coming live. And it is the Southern Fried DNN meetup. We've got an exciting time for you guys tonight. And thanks for everybody that's joining us live here, as well as those of you that are watching after the fact. Thank you for joining us on YouTube or southernfrieddnn.com. Tonight, we've got quite a treat. We've got a couple of DNNers joining us to talk about a couple of hot topics in the DNN community tonight. First off, we've got Aaron Lopez, who's going to be talking a little bit about Tailwind CSS. And if you have not jumped into that world, he's going to blow your mind. So get ready for that. And we've got Jeremy Farrance going to be joining and talking about 2SXC and some wonderful magic that you can create using structured content solution by 2SIC over in, let's see, they're in Europe. And so he'll be talking a little bit about that and showing some cool things. So before we get into that, let's take a minute to thank our sponsors. And Ryan, please help me if I miss any, but I'm going to mention manage.com, who hosts our southernfrieddnn.com website. Thank you for doing that. And we've got a few others that I think Mandeep's, we used some of their modules on the site. And thank you kindly for those licenses for that. Did I miss any there, Brian?
No, those are our active ones. We have some past sponsors that we still love to give shout outs to, JetBrains and folks like that. But our active support and appreciation goes out to the two you mentioned.
And I guess I probably should mention, many of you may not realize this, but our meetup site is actually paid for by .NET Foundation, and they're wonderful at supporting open source initiatives like ours to bring the greater open source good to the community. So thank you to them for allowing us to be able to use this paid for kind of account for free with that, and it's covered by them. So I think I've failed to kind of mention that before. So it's really actually a great thing for us because it helps us get the word out and provide a mechanism to really promote beyond just the community here. So thanks for that. I had a few announcements for this, and Ryan's going to kind of help me fill in the gaps that I may create here. First of all, just a couple of days ago, we have the release of DNN 9.10.2. So thanks to all the contributors, there were quite a few on this one. GitHub just kind of changed up a few things recently, and you have kind of a collapsed view here to start out, as well as some nice avatars to show quickly at a glance what contributors were out here. So it kind of makes it a little bit more streamlined to quickly get to the various releases in the past. So that's a nice new feature. And if you want to read more about the details of the release, you can expand this out and see the various bug fixes and documentation updates, developer experience stuff, enhancements, maintenance tasks that were done, and of course, the list of contributors. And so thanks to everybody that contributed to this. It's a great release, and we're in the process of preparing for a minor release that is somewhat major in the sense that 9.11.0 we've kind of made the decision in the technology group that Tailwind's going to kind of be a forced removal at that point. It's just time without jumping to a major version 10 release just to do that. We're going to do that in a minor release and kind of break the semantic versioning a little bit there, but we're going to make sure that that's clearly documented and warnings all over the place and things like that. Make sure things are handled good. Daniel Vladis just joined us. Did you have anything to add to that right there, just for clarity's sake, that I may have misspoke about?
No, I think it sounds good. Did we decide if we're going to do a forced removal or just not distribute it?
I think it was a forced removal in 9.11 just to keep from having to go to a major version and then quickly follow up with another major version right after that, because we've got a lot of other bigger ticket items that are on the hook for major release. So it's a little bit off from the normal semantic versioning, but again, it just kind of helps a little bit with the organization of things there. But still quite a bit of work to do with that. So there's still some time. So don't like freak out or anything on this.
Yeah.
But there may be a few more patch releases before we even get to that point. So we'll just kind of have to see how that goes. But real exciting to see the activity and the cadence of these releases.
Yeah, perhaps by the time we do our November meeting, if there was in fact a forced removal, we could do a little bit of a talk about where that is breaking changes. If you aren't already aware, there are plenty of tools and notes within each of these releases about the optional Telerik removal. You also have the testing tools from Mitch Sellers over on the Iowa Computer Gurus site, in which he's listed an ability for you to check your sites to see if you are using Telerik controls in any of the modules that you have built into the sites. So there are a few different things you can use to test, check it out. And for the most part, many of the third-party module vendors have already updated their modules to remove Telerik dependencies. So I have been impressed, surprised by the number of times that I will check on a site that I bring up to DNN 9.9 or 9.10, and I start doing the check just to see. I'm not ready to remove Telerik on them yet, but I check, and there aren't any more Telerik dependencies in those sites, even though they have a collection of third-party modules installed. So for the most part, it's looking really good for it. It won't be a major headache if you do a little bit of preparation and are ready for it.
Yep, absolutely. And of course, each of the releases ever since 9.8.0, where this was a possibility to optionally remove Telerik, you'll see a link in the release notes right off of DNN on GitHub here that'll go to the DNN docs site and clear instructions here on how to go about removing it. It's really not bad. It looks like a lot because it's 16 steps, but we just really broke that down into very granular step-by-step kind of things, make it a whole lot easier to understand and clearly know where to go and what to do. So your mileage may vary just a little bit, but there's some notes on that in here. But it's fairly painless. If you're able to do that, we highly recommend it, as always. So that's probably a pretty good segue into, I just wanted to mention, because I don't think we got to mention this last month, because a lot of activities actually been going on as it relates to DNN docs. And we've been going through, I think we mentioned it a few times in the past, that we were shifting the infrastructure and the build process and all that to fully be done by GitHub and GitHub Actions on that. And out on the repo, Daniel Veladas has worked a lot on getting the new DNN docs situated into a wonderful build tool that can be run in GitHub Actions and automatically deploy to GitHub Pages. So now the site is actually hosted on GitHub in GitHub Pages, and every pull request that comes in, it will get built in 3 different platforms: a Windows platform, an Ubuntu platform, and Mac OS. So it's just wonderful proof that you could be on any of those systems and work on the DNN docs project, and it should build locally, just like it does in the cloud on that. So that's been really good. And it's also really good in the sense that I probably should have brought this up beforehand, but I'll go ahead and do this. Out on GitHub at DNN Community, DNN Docs, you'll see there's updated documentation. And if it's been a while since you've looked at this, you'll see that the documentation is actually quite a bit more simple now as far as how you run DNN docs and work with it locally. Now you don't have to worry about going out and installing Chocolatey so that you can install DocFX so that you can get these other things, that the whole build process and the project that it's in now go ahead and takes care of those things for you and pulls those dependencies in. So
a note on that, if people are on Mac or Linux, if you can try to build CMD and report back if it works on your platform, I think we could even simplify this further, and it's the same command for everyone.
Yeah, actually build.cmd works on both Mac OS and Windows. I've already tested that there. I have not tested it on Ubuntu, but if somebody runs that, feel free to do that and report back, because I think we can get rid of these. Even though these are there, it's all kicked off by the build.cmd now. So
You could do a quick demo of how amazing it is and fix that misspelling of the word Windows.
oh, good catch. Hey, there's your new pull request there, Jeremy, that you can
All right.
pretty easily. So you should go
All
about,
right.
you know, this little edit pencil up here works really well too, if you don't want to set up your environment. So you can do that. So yeah, things have gone really well at getting the infrastructure and the build tools in place, so that now we're turning our attention to the organization of the content that's on the site, as well as what documentation we really need versus what we have. This is a big undertaking because it's almost like hitting the reset button. And I've been talking with a few people about how things are organized out here, but I still want to hear from more people. So if you have input on how this should work, or how things could be moved around to be better organized, there's a lot of clunkiness, and we are very well aware of that on the site, especially in the areas of features and tutorials. And there's a few empty spots like labs. There's an idea behind those, but they just haven't been executed yet. So what we're trying to do is establish a strong, architecture for the site moving forward, so that things won't be moved around so much, and it'll be a little more clear how to find things. Of course, when you are searching, the site literally searching, it works a whole lot better to find things that way. So you may want to do that until things get shifted around a bit, but you can use this search bar anywhere on the site, or the search bar here. And as you type it out, so if you're looking up information on the manifest, for instance, it'll automatically show up and you can kind of get to that documentation right away. So yeah, if anybody has any input, feel free to reach out to me in many of the various ways you can reach out to me on Slack or via email, or give me a call on the phone or whatever. I'd love to hear from you. Last thing I had on my list was to just make sure to mention that DNN Summit 2022 is ramping up and getting ready to be a thing. So I think it was last week or maybe week before last, they were able to announce the speakers and the sessions that are going to be on there and the schedule. So you can now come out here and check out who's going to be speaking at the conference and what they're going to be speaking on, and a little bit of bio off of each of them, and the sessions, the schedule for it. And this year, a nice new benefit is that it should show in your relative time zone. So that's a wonderful thing. That's not been the case in the past. So that's been nice to see. And now there's not as much confusion about what time things actually start and so forth. But be sure to go ahead and check all this out and see what your interests are, and be sure to register on the site there. And I just realized, Brian, help me to remember, I need to put the register button on those pages. I forgot to do that.
Yeah.
But it's on every other page of the site. So pretty soon they'll be out there, but be sure to register and attend the virtual conference.
Just to talk about registering.
Yeah,
I was going to say, just to talk about registering. We normally see people start to register in volume once they get a chance to see the speakers and see those sessions. So now is the time that you can review with your coworkers. One of the things that we've seen as compared to, I don't know, almost a dozen years of community events in person, which we're all big fans of, and I personally am a huge fan of the in-person events. We saw with Hopin here that we got a larger group of people. Even within one company, we would have more people from that one company come to the event online, because they were able to put cost behind attending versus cost for traveling and time out of work and all of those things. So it was impressive to see the difference of what it made to have the ability to meet online and attend the conference online. Well, this year we're doing it hybrid, so it's online and in person. You can do whichever way makes the most sense for you. And every time we have registrations, they always start to build up once people can see who the speakers are and what the sessions are going to be about. So dive in, take a look at those, and I'm sure as we get closer around the beginning of the year, we'll start doing some more promotions and maybe have some of those folks on to talk about their sessions.
And just a point of clarity there, the in-person aspect of it is just for the social events of this. So there's not actually going to be, real speaking going on site there, that this is more for the social aspect of it. So just be sure to make note of that. You're welcome to come out and hang out and have a good time in Vegas. There will be at the MGM Grand, and got some great rates there for that and some plans for that. So just be sure to register as soon as possible, just to kind of help the organizers there with planning for those events. Okay, Ryan, that is all I had on my list. What do you have? Do you need to share your screen? Or
no, same set of things. Otherwise, I had a couple of pages up for each of our speakers coming up, but we can also dive right into talking with them and go from there.
I'll tell you what, I'll stop and let you introduce them if you want to, if you were already prepared.
Sure. Glad to. All right. So first up, Aaron Lopez is joining us to talk about Tailwind CSS. And we have had Aaron speak recently and before. He talked about Open Graph with DNN and with DNN Dave on his video a little while back. So Aaron is no stranger here to talking with us. DNN Tailwind, if you haven't run across it before, is the love project of Steve Krantzman. So he put together this as kind of a way to introduce this for a streamlined DNN theme and system. My understanding is that it's based off of or started with the NV Quick theme, which is also something that comes straight here from home with David Poindexter and Envisionative putting that together. So we've got a mixture of all of these things to come together, and Aaron is going to take it away, and we're going to kind of do a deep dive. And I think the introduction and the description is that if you are tired of working with different libraries, if you're tired of working with different CSS libraries and components, this is streamlined and clean and simple. And one of my best favorite things is right out the bat, you see some pretty impressive performance when you're looking at things like Google PageSpeed Insights. So this is something to pay attention to for improved performance for all of your DNN sites. Aaron?
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, David. And thanks to Steve Krantzman as well for putting together DNN Tailwind. I should mention that I'm not going to be talking about the DNN Tailwind project that Steve started. That's a port of NV Quick theme basically into the Tailwind environment. But I will just be talking generally about Tailwind today and why I think it's sort of the future of user interface development. You start seeing lots of big companies starting to use it, and just why you might want to use it. And I'm going to touch base a bit about how to use it in DNN as well, in more of a just sort of a plainer version rather than the DNN Tailwind project itself.
I see. Excellent.
But yeah, so thought I'd just give a quick intro to myself. I mean, I'm sure people have seen me around here because I'm starting to join all these videos. But I'm Aaron Lopez. I run I call it an interface development company called Wolf Ex Machina. So I've been creating websites in DNN since 2006, and I started out as what you'd call back then, you'd call a skinner or just a front-end developer. It's obviously sort of changed and over the years with different technologies and just different ways things are created. So most of the sites I work in, I work with DNN and Too Sexy content, and up until I think in the beginning I started actually using, I don't know if anyone remembers Yahoo User Interface. That was a really old framework for CSS, which is now defunct. I used Blueprint, if anyone remembers that one, which is an okay one as well. And then I got into Bootstrap 2 and 3 and 4, and not much of 5 because it was sort of released. But basically, over the years, I was looking for, or especially over the past year, I've been working in Tailwind. Before that, I was really looking for how do you get the best performance out of a user interface. That's sort of where it started, and it kind of became something else because I realized it's more than just the performance. It's about the design as well, the consistency, the speed of development, accessibility, maintenance, anything that you value as a front-end developer or just a developer in general. I was looking to kind of shake things up and get outside of, just find the best way to do something. At that time, I was using Bootstrap and compiling CSS, and that was obviously a very popular way, and it still is a very popular way. But I was kind of looking for something that would get me better performance in in Chrome Lighthouse. So as you saw in that screenshot there of that high performance of 99, I think it was. That's how I came across Tailwind. It was actually, funny enough, it was through Steve Krantzman's project, and then I started looking to Tailwind itself. So yeah, so anyways, without further ado, I guess I'll start sharing my screen or something. So yeah, that's sort of where I was coming from. I was trying to find out how do I build the best user interfaces, and came across Tailwind. And Tailwind is a lot different than Bootstrap or something like that. It's more of so Bootstrap would be a component-based framework where it's like, here's some cards and here's some markup and some CSS, and you can kind of modify it if you want. Tailwind is more it's called a utility-first framework. So can I share my screen? I guess I just have to do this. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, you can.
Portion of screen. Here we go. Oops. How do I share a portion?
If you're wanting to share a portion, you have to go to the advanced tab on the share, and you should be able to resize what portion you want.
Okay, here we go. Perfect. Does everyone see that yet?
I am seeing the Tailwind
Yes, we do.
CSS site.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
So this is the Tailwind site. Obviously, it's very pretty. It's a nice documentation site. So as you can see the markup here, it's basically you use utility classes on your markup, and it just applies style based on each utility class. So in here we have text LG, and that makes the text large, and font semi-bold, and that makes it bold. That's the basic gist of it. So you just apply classes, and it modifies the look and feel of that element. And it's the way it gets high performance is basically if you use an element once, it gets added to your CSS build, and then you use it a second time and it doesn't get added because you've already added it. Unlike Sass approaches where, let's say you build a card style and you say the card is text 15 pixels and its background is gray and it's rounded corners, and then you build a second element where you create something called staff bio or something like that, and then you put rounded and pixel padding or whatever, and then it duplicates that CSS. Basically, you have two different things, so now your CSS is going to grow basically every time you add elements. When you're doing it the Tailwind way, it basically keeps it so that you're only using the same classes and it only adds it once to your framework. I thought I'd do something a little bit different. So just to kind of start off showing you some sites in DNN as well as other popular websites that use Tailwind. So this is a site that I built a few months ago. It's not the flashiest example of a Tailwind site or anything like by any means, or a DNN site, but this is just one example of a site. You can, I don't know if you can see the URL, but you can browse to that site if you'd like to and test it out. So we have a very custom navigation, very custom layouts and everything. And generally it's just very consistent styling. So I think the design is really, really consistent. But then jumping over to a site like this is also using Tailwind, but it's a completely different design. And it's because I think part of Tailwind is that you're creating a sort of a visual language. So you kind of just put your things into it and then you use those classes and you can kind of create those layouts very rapidly. This is a good example. I just like this one because it's actually action forms using the forms plugin in Tailwind to create customized forms. But those are DNN examples. Some other good examples of really high profile Tailwind sites are meetup.com, which we're obviously organized through. Really clean design. If you look at the, I don't know if it plays Diablo, but Diablo website from Blizzard is a very, very custom design. PC Mag fans, that's a Tailwind website as well. Mashable. And this is a really nice one too, is NASA. So you can see like Tailwind doesn't just make components and websites, the same way. It really just gives you the tools to make any kind of layout, any kind of design that you need to. So it's kind of the best of both worlds in that sense. The Matrix website, which is kind of a fitting one because we can choose, the red pill or the blue pill here. So
all right, you win the
pill.
presentation by mentioning that. Yep.
Okay, so I thought I would just jump into maybe building some code and showing you how this works. So do you see my VS Code? So let's go to the documentation really quickly. I'm going to kind of jump through things very quickly. I hope that's okay because I know I don't have a lot of time. But what you do, so I've just got a folder on my desktop and I'm just going to install Tailwind. So it just takes kind of a second and it's done. And then if I want to, which I always do, I always install a couple of plugins. So I install the typography plugin, which looks like this. And then there's also a plugin for forms. And then, let's see, aspect ratio.
You have fiber internet or something? That was fast.
It's a small packages, I guess. I don't know. And then line clamp. So these are the official plugins, and I pretty much stick to only the official plugins. I don't think there's many other ones. And it's also not really needed anymore. But so now I've got it all installed and I'm going to cheat the demo a little bit, but basically I'm going to jump. So that's what installing it is like. That's pretty much it. Now it's an empty folder still. You actually need basically 3 files to make it work. So I'm just going to jump to something. Let's see. So if I go to, oops. Let's see. Sorry, should have been prepared. Oh, geez, sorry. Okay.
See, Jeremy, the bar is not quite as high now.
Okay, so in a Tailwind package, the core thing is this. You have a Tailwind config, and this is really, really plain and boring at the moment. But your config is kind of like, imagine it's a big pot. And in that pot, you're going to put all the ingredients you want. So you can put in like your colors and the shadows and things like that. Out of the box, Tailwind is what it is, and it's very good. But you can customize it to make it work for your brand, your design. We have a post CSS config because Tailwind is a post CSS project. And so I'm requiring Tailwind CSS as well as auto prefixer. And I even have a thing in here to do CSS nano to minify. when I actually build it. And then I've got package.json. So I've got a couple of scripts. So I have one script is just a watcher. So when I develop, I just have this watcher running, and it's just watching what I'm doing in my build, basically. And then I have a build, which is just the production build, and then it just minifies it, and that's pretty much the only difference. And then you see like some dependencies. So I've got my aspect ratio and my forms and line clamp and all that kind of stuff installed. This is kind of the boring stuff. This is, you know, once you kind of set this up once, every new project, you don't really need to set it up again. It's kind of this, it stays kind of the same for the most part. The fun part is basically this. So if I open up this index.html, I already have Tailwind installed into this. And so if I go to, let's see. So npm run dev. So I've turned on the watcher, and I'm just going to open this index in live preview. So where are we? So I've got just an H1 and it says something. So if I go and I edit my H1 and I say, well, actually, let's just start with this. Let's start with the div. And on that div, I'm going to add a class equals BG gray 100. I'll put my H1 inside that. And then padding Y is 5. So now it automatically makes the gray background, and it's got some padding on the top and bottom. And so if I do like text for XL to make it big, font display to give it the display font, which I think is actually doesn't really matter in this build particularly. Font bold. Let's see what happens there. Okay, so it's a little bit bigger. So let's wrap it with the container. So this is one of the container classes in this build, or that's part of every build. And then you have to do MX auto for it to center it out, and PX5 to give it some padding. So we're not doing anything particularly amazing, but it's just a very rapid way of developing. So let's say I wanted to do something like a little bit more complicated. So if I go like div class grid, if I want to make a 3-column grid, I could just do grid calls 3 and gap is 20. And then let's say that I just take my H1s, for example. Now I've got a 3-column grid. Now, if we look at the actual build, the actual CSS build, let's take a look at that size. So right now it's outputting to skin.css. So right now it is not minified. It's just all it is the base level, the components and the utilities. And where are we? Oh, and it's also the components that I have. So that's sort of the gist of it. What you can do as well is you can do really cool things. So let's say I wanted to put in like a custom thing that's not part of a typical, like what's not part of the configuration of this build. Let's say I wanted to make like a box, and that box was, let's say it's one of the green colors from the system, but I'm going to give it a width. So can someone give me just a number between like 200 and 500? Anyone? Let's say
320.
320. So the number 320 is not really part of the design system, but we're just adding it as a value because it uses the just-in-time compiler. So the typical Tailwind, what actually do is you put in all the things and it would build a huge CSS file. And then you do a purge at the end and it would remove it. But nowadays, what it is a just-in-time compiler. So you're actually starting at 0, basically. And then as you add things, it just adds it to the thing. So let's take a look. So we got to make this a block probably, and we probably need to make it, let's say, rounded full, and see what that does. What am I missing?
You got to put some content in there.
Yeah.
Quite possibly. Let's see. There we go. Oh, did I not put
That
a
was the ticket.
on? Oh, hold on. It's because it's a block level element. Hold on. Inline block. Or it's because it's a, yeah, here we go. Oh, what's going on here? Okay, hold on. Let me switch to this other project I was working on.
It's not contained if that's what you were trying to do.
Add important.
I created 3 projects just for this demo, just so I could kind of step through. But I'm just going to
Isn't it-
jump to the latest one, which I think is a bit better of a build,
Doesn't it have a center tag?
possibly. So this is just an example of, this is a better example where we have a config file that actually has the purge set up. So this is where so we got mode JIT, which means just in time. And then we have a purge, which is basically looking through all of my files and knows which ones to like keep, basically, just to make sure. Purge is actually a bit of a misnomer here because it's part of the old thing, but eventually be content. So in this, I'm actually watching or checking through all of these folders. So I'm actually looking through the desktop modules folder as well as like skins and stuff like that. And then here's where I set my font family. I can set box shadows, radiuses. I can even set fill colors. This is a really cool thing too. So I'm creating background images all in one spot. And when you do that, it means that you have that background image as a class you can apply to literally anything you want to. Moving down here, I actually have typography set. So for that prose class, as well as I set all of my colors. And then I've got my plugins here. So this should be a better sort of example. If I were to look at something like this, for example, we could sort of create these based on Tailwind classes. So if I were to go like this and say header class, color is BG, old burgundy, the text is white, it's maybe, you know, got some padding on the top and bottom. Let's see, playground. Oh, I got to turn it on. npm, not dev. Okay. And then, you know, you could create like your nav. So if I put the logo inside of a container. So that's sort of a start of it there. Put your nav in a container or something like that. And then you could do, you know, something like this. So we have our links, but then I could do something like class flex row, it's already row, but then gap is 5. So now it kind of spaces it out like that. And on the top container, maybe I do flex justify between item center. And now I've already got it left and right. So I was playing around with this a little bit before. So I actually have, oh no, where was it? Oh, I lost my thing. Okay. But basically, you can create these layouts very rapidly. So if I look at my Tailwind, not minified because I didn't build it yet, but this is my my build as it's going. You can see it adds classes as I use them. So if I look at the file size, it's only this big. So 18 whatever. And then if I add new classes, let's say I add a class of, well, sorry, if I reuse a class, let's say I use class flex, it's not going to grow because it already has class flex in it. So that's how it keeps the performance very small. And I find that in practical uses, I don't have file sizes bigger than 75, 80K on completely designed websites, like a website that I've actually gone through and built lots of modules, lots of interfaces for. Because if you build a 3-column thing once, you have that 3-column thing, or like 3 columns are possible throughout the entire thing. Yeah. So
Aaron, are you okay with questions at this point, or?
Yeah, sure, for sure.
I mean, I'm just curious. It seems like I read something in Tailwind about, because one of the immediate things that jumps out is like, well, this is cool. You're not having to live in CSS, right? Or SAS, but you're running, like if you're really building this out, you're going to end up with a ton of classes on a bunch of things potentially, right? So doesn't Tailwind have some kind of way to keep from getting class bloat in your HTML there, or?
Yeah, for sure. So like, let's say I had a button and it's like an inline flex and its background is Carolina blue and its text is white and its hover is, DG opacity 90. So here's my button. Usually you'd have maybe some padding all around it, and then it's rounded. So
Don't be chintzy, put in some media queries.
okay, so let's say that you want the button to be bigger on big screens. You want it to be like way bigger, let's say. So on 2XL, I'm going to make it text XL. So here's an example of like media query. So I'm going up and down. If you don't want to use all these classes, like this actually makes kind of sense for buttons especially. What you would do is you would just open up your Tailwind and you use the applied. So actually, I think I have to do @layer base, and then you use apply. And I'm going to create a class called button, and then apply in here. So now it builds it to, where am I? Now I can do button class button. And it just adds that to the CSS file. So this is, if you want to go the more semantic route, you can do that if that's important to you. But it's also just useful for, obviously, for keeping buttons, like keeping some classes simple, which you do want to do when you're working with some classes simple when you're working with buttons, for example. You'll find that actually a lot of the time you don't need to use that. Like you would think, oh, that's going to apply for like cards or something. But actually a lot of the time cards are very different. For example, that component itself, you have cards that go vertical, horizontal, you have cards that are big, small, cards that have images or don't have images. So you end up just kind of working with the templates anyways. And yeah, so that's the way I find it. Like I definitely use like apply a bit, but not a ton. So if you notice on that example where I showed you like this site, actually, this site, I used apply on buttons like this one, but also even the cookie disclaimer, I used the apply because I can't access and modify that HTML of the cookie disclaimer. You'll find it actually same thing for the login, I think. So the login control, because I can't control what the login does. It's just a bunch of markup. So I use that to modify that.
So Aaron,
yeah.
I think another way to ask what David's asking, maybe how large is the site design versus per page custom CSS? You know, stuff that applies throughout the site, that's your theme, that's your look and feel. And then how much do you just bother to customize per page? Just rough numbers, I don't know.
Per page. I'm not really sure I understand. So,
so basically you want a standard color throughout the scheme, a standard color scheme. So you obviously put that up at the site level. You want sort of similar buttons, so you put that at the site level. But then it sounded like you were saying you would just go in and at each page modify different elements as you needed. But maybe you don't.
yeah, maybe this might help if I just show you an example. So I use Too Sexy Content a lot.
Sure.
So if I'm logged into this site, for example, what's a good component? This looks like a nice, simple component. So if I go to edit the template, I'm using Tailwind classes. So on this section, I've got a padding on the top and bottom of 10, and that's something represented in rems. BG Cultured is like a light gray. And then I've got a container. And then if you look down, so for each of those, so if you look back at what these are, it's like a little benefit block with an icon. For each of them, I have a block, and it changes per breakpoint and whatnot. So it changes width based on the breakpoint, and then yeah, I even have some custom widths and stuff. So basically all of my templates look kind of like this. So that's a nice thing about like this is not for if you're managing HTML manually, then this is not for that. But if you're managing HTML manually, I mean, that's sort of a different set of problems, I suppose. Like, so you have templates, presumably, like, so a DNN skin is a template, essentially, or like a menu is a template. So you don't actually have to write those classes tons of times. You just put it into your loop or whatever. And then it loops through and just becomes the same thing over and over again. So actually, I'll show you like another example.
Hey, Aaron, while you're bringing that up, do you find yourself just putting your CSHTML files from Too Sexy into your folder structure where you're kind of building out your Tailwind stuff so that it knows what you're using? Is that kind of your workflow, or?
Yeah, so my typical workflow, it looks very similar to this here. So you'll see that I actually installed Tailwind right into the skin folder. Now I have it set up in a really like simple kind of way where I'm literally just working in what I call a sandbox folder, and it's just an HTML folder. And I just build out all my interfaces in there, and I port that over to the skins, like the default.ascx and all that. Someone else, if you have a more sophisticated setup and you actually are running, DNN locally or whatever, you could theoretically do the same thing more or less, and then just be working directly in your default.ascx or whatever. Yeah.
I guess the question was a little more about specifically Too Sexy because it's in a different folder structure, right? Your template.
Oh yeah, sorry. So I have it installed here, and this is my folder structure. But in my thing, I'm actually stepping outside of the folder here, and I'm looking through those folders.
That makes sense.
Mine's a little bit of a complicated setup because I typically don't. Usually what I do is I develop all my interfaces locally in HTML, and then I would just copy. I would go, okay, this part's done, and then I would just copy it and then put it into Too Sexy and then wrap things around it.
Okay, gotcha.
You might have a different experience because you're obviously like a better programmer than me, but like your setup would be different, and then you could probably just work directly in Too Sexy content, perhaps. Well, actually, I don't know, because you'd have to be in VS Code. I don't know if you've got it set up like that. Another thing with that in VS Code, it's really nice, is that you have IntelliSense for Tailwind, so it tells you all the class names. So you can do fancy things like, let's say that I had like a card. Oops. And then make sure I've got this running still. And actually, yeah, so I've got an A tag, and then I want to put in, like, I've got an H2 or an H3. So here's the title. And then I've got, you know, some content. And then I've got, let's say, a read more. So let's see what this looks like so far. So let's put, you can put something like this. So we've got background is, let's say, Carolina blue. We probably have to make this a block level element. And let's make it text white. Oops. And you know, I'm just going to put some padding on this just to move things away from it. Okay. So you can actually do like group, like so I can put a group on this A tag, and then when I go like this, I can say group hover underline. So when I hover over the group, oh, what's going on? I got to put some padding on this or something. Inline flex, that's conflicts. Oh, flex call. So you see when I hover over the entire group, it actually underlines the content there. You can do a lot more complicated stuff than that too, if you wanted to. You know, we could have like, so you can actually wrap things and then have groups. Like if I wanted to say, you know, first child, font bold, I think. Or is it first child? Oh wait, hold on. I don't think it's that. First of type, font bold, let's say. No. Oh yeah, because they're all different types. Sorry. Anyways, yeah, so it allows for sort of tons of variation. So you can do like complicated hovers or transforms or transitions. Yeah, this demo has gone terribly. Sorry, guys.
No.
I wanted, there was actually so much more I wanted to show you, but I just kind of lost my train of thought. And yeah. Do you guys have any questions? Like, do you want to just
See,
jump
Jeremy? See,
Well-
Jeremy? No.
Yeah. Aaron, I was going to ask you just about your personal style of things. So I understand a little bit better that what you're benefiting from when you're working with Tailwind here is that the only CSS that makes it into the build project is what you ended up creating and using, and therefore it's always as small as whatever you've used in reference, so you don't have bloats and extra things. That said, if you looked across 2 or 4 of your projects, do you end up using the same things over and over again? Do you have like your favorite bag of tricks that you keep using again and again and again, and those, if you end up looking at it, you know, they're your own little Aaron Lopez library. They're the ones that you use constantly all the time?
Yeah, so actually, I'll answer the first part of your question. So one of the big things that makes this faster for development, I think, is the less context switching. So there's actually a few things, and this is kind of well documented in Tailwind. There's no naming required, as there is in like typical format. So like you would have to say, oh, this is div class card, or this is div class hero, or this is div class whatever. There's no naming, so you can just jump right into how does it look and how does it behave on different screen sizes. That's a really big thing. You'll be shocked at how much faster you can develop things. The other thing is context switching. There's no jumping from your HTML file into a CSS file, or jumping between them to be like, okay, this is the markup and then this is some CSS, and oh, actually I need this markup to accommodate this CSS. So you're kind of just in there all the time. And the other thing is, you kind of mentioned going from site to site. It 100% is so good about being able to just take things like that you've made and taking it and putting it into another site. And I think so thank you for mentioning that, because that is a huge game changer.
You just drop it in and it works, and you go, oh, I forgot this. Oh, I gotta go grab this. You don't have to do that.
Exactly, yeah, because like, let's just say, for example, this navigation I very poorly made. This navigation, there's nothing about it that it doesn't, like, I don't have to go and find the CSS that it depends on. It just works in another project because it does exactly what it says it does. It flexes across, and there's a gap of 5. So like when you see that, that's the other thing too. It's kind of maintenance wise. If you're a developer, you're looking at that, you know exactly what that does. You don't have to kind of guess or go find the CSS. There's no conflicts. You're kind of contained to that thing. The other thing is that, you can, what was the other thing? Yeah, so there's no kind of guesswork. A lot of people complain about that, there being too many classes. But actually that's really refreshing, because you can kind of just see, like, you can kind of go, okay, well, gap 5, and then I'm going to say MD gap is maybe bigger, gap 10. So I make it a little bit bigger. It's a really refreshing way of doing that, because there's no jumping around. Basically.
That's kind of huge, Aaron, because like one of the drawbacks of other frameworks that are component based, like you mentioned, I guess, is that sometimes you feel limited. You know, like let's just say you have margin 1 through 5. Well, that's what you get. Or one, you know, this you could be more granular, and you know, and it's by convention, I guess, is the way the classes are. You know, by the names. So you don't have to worry about remembering every little class. You're just kind of starting with the convention of the name and then using the value as a part of the name, I guess, right?
Exactly, yeah. But the nice thing too is that, like, let's say that I go like this. Okay, I've got BG Imperial Red. I don't know if anyone recognizes these colors at all, but so I've got BG Imperial Red, and let's say that I can actually change this to just whatever I want. This is just happens to be the name of the color, but I could do primary. And then now it's BG primary, and I never forget. It's shockingly easy to remember these colors, remember these classes. And the cool thing too is, like, let's say that you take, let's say that you want to put in a color that's not really part of your build. So like the Facebook blue, for example, shows up when you're, you know, maybe styling some icons. I don't remember what the Facebook blue color is, but oh wait, here we go. So like, actually, I've never tried RGB. So let's try this BG, you know, and then you just put in the value, and then it's added into the system. So like it's so like, and that works for literally anything. You don't need to configure that. That's just the JIT engine figuring out, like, you want to put some custom value in, okay, and then it just drops it in there.
So Aaron, what were your bigger challenges going from like Bootstrap to Tailwind? Any friction or concepts you had to sort of rethink? Yeah,
for sure. The big thing that I was definitely worried about was, how do I, like, one, there is a learning curve to getting set up, for sure. There's a learning curve to installing that stuff. I think now that I've kind of figured it out, it's a breeze. I just copy things from project to project. Getting used to the idea that, like, you can't just, sorry, I was going to say that you can't just style things, but you can just style things. sort of knowing which things to put into like the build, getting used to the sort of workflow of like making sure that things are included in your CSS and you're purging the right things is a big thing for sure.
It sure didn't look too bad though when you set it up initially. It was fairly simple, so that looked good.
Yeah, and actually, you know, the Tailwind config and everything, I copy these from site to site and then just modify them. And like, it's shocking when you do that, how easy and fast it is. Because it's like, I also have kind of, Ryan touched on it. I have a set of components, like I've got a hero and it's a too sexy hero that I like using. And it uses like certain classes, and then those classes inherit from the build. So that when I copy from site to site and I change these values, those styles get updated. So it actually kind of instantly brands that next component without me having to like go in and just build a new one, basically. In terms of friction, yeah, I don't know, honestly. It's hard to say, like definitely learning curve a bit in the beginning, just getting used to the workflow. But in terms of actual work, it's been incredible, like being able to just build interfaces so quickly, to do responsive as quick as I have been able to get that performance. Like all the sites out of the box, basically. It turns out performance is very related to CSS in a very big way. And so to get those things sort of packaged together, it just instantly improves the performance. The other thing I would say about it, like in general, is that it has an amazing community that releases these really, really high quality videos. So if they release, it seems like a couple times a month, they'll release a video on how to do something. Well, that was the other thing I wanted to mention. So there have been projects where they have been started in Bootstrap 4 and have existed as Bootstrap 4 sites, but then you can do prefixing at the configuration level so that suddenly all the classes have a prefix, so it doesn't conflict with other frameworks. So you can actually integrate. So what I've done, they just released a video, one of the last videos they did. Like I had a Bootstrap 4 site, but I'm like, I don't want to build a new thing, like a whole new page that's based on this old Bootstrap 4 stuff. So what I'm going to do is I just made a build in Tailwind that injects into, like, it's just a CSS file that goes like a layer on top that conflicts with nothing else. And I get the advantage of Tailwind basically. So I can use CSS grid. So I can do lots of transformations, group hovers, animations, better responsive tweaking, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Oh, the other thing I wanted to show you, but I totally blanked on it, was there's actually like dark mode. So let's say dark BG gray is 800. So right now, I think I've got it configured for media, which means that if I turn my my user settings to like dark mode, then it changes the color of the thing. Where am I? I'm in the totally wrong file. Okay. Let's do this. Let's put it on the background. So you see, like, it actually changed this header background to dark gray because I changed my computer to dark mode. But you can actually switch it to class. So if you wanted to do a toggle, let's say, you could just do it class-based. You wrap your whole page in dark or light, I guess, and then it switches the class, and then it switches all those styles. Yeah, I think
Aaron,
that Tailwind overall, yeah.
I was just going to say there's some questions in the chat at the bottom.
Oh, sorry, I missed those ones. Sorry. Oh, geez, where is
Okay,
this?
I can read them out too if you'd like.
Sure.
One from Alessandra. Okay, but in the case of creating content and adding a class in the content, how do we make sure we have those classes added to the theme? Do we always need to have a sandbox folder or some HTML with the classes on it?
Adding it to the content. So
Yes, let's say you're in a text HTML module or something like that. And
Okay, so two things. Oh man, I'm starting to remember all the stuff I wanted to talk about. So thank you for the questions. So there's actually a typography plugin for Tailwind, and it's called just like, you just do prose. And then when you put in prose, so by default, Tailwind doesn't actually, it just resets everything to the same size. But when you have a prose plugin, it actually styles it really, really beautifully. So like, let me just see if I can find the Tailwind typography.
You mean that's like a default set of standards?
Yeah, so let me see if I can find this, this typography plugin. This is actually, so that was one of my big concerns when I went in. It was like, well, you know, if I have to style every class, then how do I do that? But they've come up with a plugin, so it's an official plugin that styles all your content for you. And then, so you can put just prose, that class prose on something, and then it will style all your markup. Now, the cool thing is that for DNN, we have obviously normal, the normal class. There is a way to configure, I don't have it in here, but you can change it. So you can just change a configuration with one line. So it says, instead of using the prose class, it uses normal. So if you wanted to build this into DNN for like HTML modules using the normal class, you totally could. It would be no problem whatsoever. Yeah, does that answer Alessandra's question?
she says yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, this is really cool stuff. Anybody else have questions for Aaron?
Yeah, sorry about this presentation. I thought this would go a lot better. I really wish I had captured the essence of Tailwind. I think it was just too much pressure on me. But I think, yeah, if there's no other questions, I mean, I'd love to see some more questions if anyone has any, but if not, I'll just wrap up, I guess.
I'm sure you're going to get
I think-
bombarded in Slack. So
Yeah, Aaron, I think it means you just have to come back and do it a second time next year, and we'll do Tailwind meeting 2 with Aaron.
Okay. Well, on that note, I'm actually a speaker at DNN Summit, so this has been a good dry run for me. And I'm going to be talking about Tailwind, especially in DNN. What I would say overall is that I know I may not have captured it here, but honestly, give it a try. Really, like even in the marketing of Tailwind, they say, we know it looks like a puke amount of HTML classes or CSS classes in HTML. Honestly, give it a try because it is a game changer. I think I develop websites in a fraction of the time that I used to, and they're higher quality, and they get a better performance score because the CSS files are, you know, for finished sites around 70K, and my accessibility is improved, and there's less context switching. It's really a game changer. The other thing I kind of wanted to mention too was that if you're on a multi-developer team, all the classes are the same. Everyone's working with the exact same thing. Then you can take those, you can put it into a new site. Like, it really changes the way that you build interfaces. It speeds things up like a crazy amount. Oh, and the other one big thing I wanted to really say, but I didn't capture it, was when you have those things standardized, it allows you to play around more. So that's a big thing in a lot of their documentation, is like they will test out different sizes on different things. Because you have that granular control, you don't have to really go back to CSS or jump around and back and forth. You can play around with different widths or different heights. You can play around with different rounded corners on things. It allows you to kind of play more, that you end up with better designs because of it. Yeah, and the other resource I would send you, everybody, I'll just send this in the chat here. There's a really cool website called play.tailwindcss.com, and you can play around with Tailwind right in your browser. So you can try out different things. I use Too Sexy Content a lot, and I use EasyDNN as well sometimes, so the news module and action forms. I haven't had any issues with any of those, and actually it really seems to fly with Too Sexy Content. Because Too Sexy Content, it's up to you to create the templates. So when you start using them, because you have complete control, you can just do whatever you want in it, and it really seems to work really well. So yeah, I would say just really give it a try, because I think it's not only, I think it's a real paradigm shift. It's a game changer that you're starting to see more and more development companies use, and I think you'd be better off using it. So I hope that gives you enough impetus to give it a shot.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron, for this. It was really good. So big round of applause. Yay. And it's okay. This is the most forgiving group ever. So there's never pressure. It's just self-inflicted. Yeah. Any information is good. So it's awesome. I can't wait to play with it myself a little bit there and do a little bit more. I've just really scratched the surface, but we haven't noticed that you like it. I mean, you really need to be a little bit more of a cheerleader and get out there, and really be an ambassador for it. Right? Thanks a lot. Ryan, I didn't know if you wanted to introduce Jeremy there or not.
Sure, I will give that a try. And I think that we need to stop sharing on Aaron's screen, and then we'll go in.
Yeah, he stopped sharing.
There we go. There we go. All right. So we are going to head over now to speak with Jeremy, who's going to talk with us about Too Sexy Content, 2SXC. I think I heard David call it, or maybe Aaron called it by something else a second ago, and I was like, wait, what are we calling this this module anymore now? But it's 2SXC, and it's been a revolution in DNN. A lot of people are building structured content with it because of the flexibility. There are plenty of people even here on the meetup with us who call themselves divas and developers that swear by Too Sexy. Jeremy has Accuracy as his company, where he boasts on his bio that, primarily at the end of the day, he's mainly a coffee brewer and lover of fine coffee. So we're going to pass it over to him to hear some, what I would call a deep dive into Too Sexy, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
All right, sharing screen. So not to steal anything or NCAP, but if you go to the NPM stats and compare Bootstrap over 5 years with Tailwind, Tailwind is an amazing thing that it's come about in such a short time frame. I also finally did my first project. I'm sure Aaron's real proud of me, but I admit it was a template. I didn't do a lot of Tailwind stuff, but there's my first Tailwind site. Yay. And it's really interesting too, because you look at all these, there is a lot of class bloat, and there's probably ways to handle this better. But even after I got a lot of this stuff done and modified, seeing the resulting CSS file be only 17 point something K really did impress me. So I sat there with the tree shaking and took out a class and watched the file size. I watched the class literally, VS Code updates in real time. So you watch your whole class just vanish from the screen the moment you hit save. It's amazing. And so I agree with Aaron. You got to check it out. You got to give it a try. You got to find some little project to play with and just get started. There's a bit of a learning curve, but as you can see, I think Aaron went from 0 to expert on remembering most of the classes, what, in like 6 to 9 months? Yeah, something like that. All right, so anyhow, what I'm here to talk about is structured content. And I don't know, so real quick about me, I've been playing with computers since 1978. I often feel like I've never really had a job. I just keep playing. People pay me for stuff. That's okay, but I still get to play. I get to have a lot of fun. There's only two things in my life I've ever kind of noticed that I've become a fanboy of. And one of them was the Commodore Amiga, which vanished somewhere in the 90s, though it is still around, which is weird. And then DNN's the other thing that I hate to call myself a fanboy, but you know, I am actually a fan of it, and that's why I stay so involved in the community. It's a lot of fun. I like the people that we get to work with. I like what we get to deliver for our clients. It's kind of amazing. Acurity is now in the process of celebrating 15 years, which is amazing to me because I never expected it to go this far. It started with one project for a park district, and I think we're coming up on 250 projects. We may have gone by it, but I didn't keep good track in the early days, so it's hard to figure out. So what you're looking at, I think you can see the screen. Yes? Someone nod. Okay, good. So we've got DNN 9.10.2 deployed, brand new. Too sexy, we're using the LTS version 11.22.1. I do have AccuTheme in place on here. If most people are not familiar with AccuTheme, it's what we use in-house. It's a custom theme building tool for DNN, and it's heavily based around Bootstrap. So I've been kind of crying all year listening to Aaron about how great Tailwind is, but I'm stuck on Bootstrap. So whatever, I live with it. So if anyone's ever checked this out, there's a lot of interesting stuff in here, but I'm not going to go into that right now. But for a project like this, we can get our AccuTheme from GitHub, do a quick build, and you get a really clean looking theme like this in a few seconds nowadays. And I even recently finally tackled the concept of making an installer. So when you do npm run build, you actually have Webpack put together a zip file for you that will install in DNN. All right, so enough about that. Bootstrap and font awesome. And then there's a few other niceties under the hood there. So all we're really doing to get started on this demo is, let me make sure I'm actually still logged in here. Am I? I am not. Please stand by. All right. DNN 9.10.2. Only thing we've added to the site is a logo page, which is where we're going to do the demo. Nothing's on here. We did go ahead with Too Sexy and throw the content module in place. And as you can see, there's one default app in here. And if anyone's interested, that's actually a photo of me from 1968 with my brother. So now I can claim at the family get-together in December that I showed you guys a picture of my brother. See, that's him. There you
I
go.
want to see you guys rocking it out. You know,
Yeah,
cool.
it's perfect. Love it.
It is awesome. Oh, and also, you know, this is the thing about my mom. She wrote all over our family photos. Drives me mad sometimes because, you know, I scan them. The worst thing is, on a lot of them, she cut our head out into a little circle and put it in her pendant. Okay, so that's another thing.
Nice. You don't do
I
that
know.
anymore with digital
All right.
photos. So I think that's awesome.
It is awesome. It's a lot of fun too. All right, so you assign skins. This is the home skin. This is actually a slightly different skin. For the inside pages, has a couple of different panes in place. Besides the content app, which I allowed to install, we did actually, let's see, what are we doing here? I think, yeah, I let a couple of other ones install just so you could see them in the file structure. I've also preloaded some logos and other things that you'll see in a few minutes. And a couple things that you should probably be aware of, though I don't really highlight them very much in this demo. In extensions, on every project, every version of DNN now, thanks to Daniel Veladas, we go into libraries and we make sure we update the code DOM, and we're always using C# 7.3. It's pretty amazing. You guys should check it out. If you don't do that, it's worth it just for two simple things. Learn how to use tuples. They're awesome. I use them as little on-the-fly databases for all kinds of cool stuff. And the other thing I can't live without anymore is string interpolation. If you don't know what it is, look it up. It'll make sense to you immediately, and you'll stop using string.format forever. So definitely check that out. The other thing I wanted to just demo real quick, because a lot of people seem surprised that I do this and ask me how and why. So I'm just going to cover it real quick. The quick add menu in DNN is now sitting wonderfully under site behavior more. Turn this puppy on, hit save, and then close that and refresh. And you now have these nice little quick inserts for getting stuff on your pages, especially when you have a nice theme with well-organized panes, the way we do, of course. One of the things that I like pointing out.
Flip out. That's the most amazing thing ever. How long has that been there? That's unbelievable.
How long has it been there? Is it 9.8? Anyone know?
9.8.
9.8 or 9.8?
Yeah.
Somewhere along there, yeah.
So now pay attention. Here's the special sauce you need to know. Go to extensions. Go to your HTML module, hit edit, and take that puppy out of the common category and set it to none. And then go down here and hit save and close. And then go to Too Sexy, put those in common, save and close, edit app, common, save and close, refresh, and now you are armed to the teeth with Too Sexy content and app ready to install anywhere you want.
This would make an excellent DNN docs PR.
So I'm going to use the feature now. Select app, content pane, insert it at the top. Well, it's the only one. So in DNN, in Too Sexy, there's two things. There's the content app, and it confuses people because there's a content module and there's an app module. And they have a different approach to things. And along the way, I'm actually going to point out a few things that are different, because it actually ended up making my presentation kind of more interesting than it was. So we now have an app module on the page, whereas before, over here, this is a content module, and one of the content app views is now on the page. And I'll get more into what the difference is later. So in here, I've already gone and created my logo demo app. So we're going to select that. It's spinning because we don't have a view yet. There's nothing I can do about that. So I need to go straight in to the administration. This is raw, blank module. There's nothing in these folders, just to show you. If I drill down into the website, portals, 0, Too Sexy, logo demo. Ooh, I did put some files in there. Okay, I take it back. So there's nothing in the data, no views. So one of the things I like that I've gotten the staff here and we do all the time is we make sure that when we're creating and designing stuff, before we start coding, we create the HTML first. We want to make sure we've got representative stuff on screen before we start bringing in logic and coding and headers and footers and repeater areas and all that other stuff. And so what you're going to see here is we're going to create a view and we're going to call it logo demo HTML. And I don't see a lot of people in 2Sexy doing this anymore, but just real quick, bear with me. We're going to do a token template. And I've already made this. It's just a bunch of HTML named logo demo. We don't even have to assign a content type. I'm not going to turn on list or anything. Just go. And then close out here, go back here, and it now appears. And I can select it. And what you're looking at here is plain HTML output. So here it is in VS Code. And I'm pointing out a few things here, like there are tokens you can use, but otherwise, this is an HTML playground right inside DNN, and you can just get everything you want down to the nitty-gritty working. So in this one, all we have is a div wrapper. I'm doing this module ID thing so that my wrapper actually, I kind of have a pet peeve around here. We have an employee or two that writes very leaky CSS. So you'll notice the module IDs have wrappers on all of the inline, the CSS we're doing right here. But I'll come back to that in a little bit. So there's not much here. There's a div, a UL, and a bunch of LIs repeating. So the reason for this is because what we're actually doing is taking this article, and I'll paste that into the chat so you can see it. I meant to do that sooner. But that article is for learning CSS and doing arrangements, and they're showing off one of the very common things. And it's funny, you even saw earlier in Aaron's demos, you saw logo arrangements. And Tailwind does a really nice job with that. And so this is raw CSS. And he goes through all the different details of putting these oddly shaped logos on the screen and getting them working. One of the things I wanted to show is there's some really cool CSS stuff here. This article is really worth it. Check this out. We're going to take, notice they're a little tight. So just to show you that I'm live and editing the files, we'll take the padding off. I don't have hot refresh going, but there's some padding around those. Now, one of the things that's interesting is I'm going to put a background in so that you can see that not all of my logos are transparent. Some of them are, but you'll notice the Acuity one's not, NASA's not. And one of the things the article goes into is this really cool feature that I hadn't paid much attention to. I knew what multiply did for my old photoshopping days, but I didn't realize it was a common CSS thing now. So if you take this, did that wrong. You can now see off the gray background that multiply as a CSS class gives you, in effect, transparencies on JPEGs. Now, it doesn't work 100%. You got to play sometimes to get it to work correctly. But this often saves us a lot of time from processing photos and doing things that we normally waste a lot of time on. And it's just a simple CSS class. So it's also interesting to point out there's some nice advanced stuff in here too. We're doing modern CSS selectors. If you're not familiar with that stuff, I recommend you go look at it. So this is actually saying that image tags where the source contains, that's what the asterisk is there. If you do a $, it means ends with, asterisk means contains. And so it's looking for the file name in here. And if it finds, where's one? PNG, PNG, PNG. So if it finds PNG question mark like that, it applies the CSS class. So anyhow, that's not really what we're here to do, but there's some cool stuff in that article and you should check it out. Let's turn off the background. Actually, I'm going to leave the background turned on because that's not our real demo. Okay, so what's really nice here though is to understand that using the token files, you're putting plain HTML on the page in a way that's protected. So in the old days, you had to fight with your DNN HTML module because it would strip out your stuff or change things on you. This doesn't do that. This does a raw emit right to the page, and it works really great. All right, so now you would ask yourself, what does all this have to do with structured content? Well, this is a perfect scenario for structured content, at least a basic example. So we have a bunch of items that could be data here, and they repeat nicely. And we've already built the HTML and the CSS in a way that it will adapt. Notice I just took out 2 items, and it knows how to center these bottom 3 versus before, where it knew how to center just the bottom 1. So all of those details have been worked out ahead of time. Your CSS is just going to work no matter what it does. And now we come to the part where we can do the programming, the code. And that's the part that's amazingly simple. And we find here that if you separate the HTML and that kind of front end stuff from getting into the coding, things go a lot faster too. So what we're going to do is come up here, and I'm not going to use Quickie. The hell with Quickie. Nobody likes Quickie. So content pane at the top, we're inserting a too sexy app this time. I'm going to choose the same HTML view so far. You can ignore that for a second. So now we're going to go into admin, views. We're going to create a new, no, we're not, we're going to copy, because there's no reason to create anymore when you've got them in front of you ready to go. So we're just going to call this one logos. We're going to switch from token to C#. We're going to add logos, and you'll see that it's over here in VS Code. That file, the moment I hit OK here, should appear. There it is. And we don't have a content type yet. We don't have a demo content item yet. I am going to turn this on so I don't forget it later. So we're enabling list mode, and that all that is whether or not you're dealing with one piece of content in the data or a whole bunch. You know, whether it's articles or a bunch of logos, it just means you're going to get past a whole list of them. All right, so there's our new logos, and we can get back in here and edit stuff. We'll come back to that in a little bit. So now I'm going to switch. Notice, even though there's nothing in this file, here it is right here. There's almost nothing in here. Too Sexy, smart enough to give us a toolbar. And we can now switch to our logo view, hit OK. And you'll notice all it's going to do once it's done refreshing is output some, put your content here, which is exactly what it says here inside a div. So now the process becomes, what do I need from here to move into my code file? And what's interesting is you only need the UL and the opening div tag. I'm going to actually take a couple of items temporarily just so visually it makes more sense. And we'll leave that up there for now. So obviously I need to close my UL and close my div. And then because this thing's finished, I'm just going to come down here and grab that little style sheet we built from the article, copy it in here, put it on the page. And this isn't going to work right away, but I'm just going to save and show you where we're at already. And again, we haven't done much in the way of code. And by the way, we've broken everything. Oh, so first thing you need to learn is the @ symbol in Razor is really important. So having these @ symbols here for the media queries There's two different ways, if you're not familiar, to handle that. You either do two @signs, but we actually find around here that if you do it the other way, which is pass in a string as if it's a function, is more readable. But just to show you both work, we'll hit save, and both of those will start working. I don't know if you guys can see my screen okay. There, that's a little bigger. All right, so it's starting to get normal. You can still see tags and whatnot. So first thing I'm going to do is convert my wrapper. So as you guys know, in Razor, you're doing DNN. Oops, I hate that thing. Module ID is the same as the code you just, the token you just saw. So that's going to output my, give me an idea of AccuLogos dash, probably something like 431 or something. And then all of these need to get replaced. And we can do that nice and quickly with @dnn.module.module_ID. That looks right. Place all. Save. As you're playing with DNN and Razor, don't be afraid if you get an error. Actually read it. It looks daunting at first, but in Too Sexy and DNN, they'll even go so far when you do something wrong as to inline supply you a link to the article you probably need to go look at in their docs. They've been doing that more and more lately, and it's really impressive sometimes. All right, so now we have two items in here. And instead of, that was weird. Hang on, I need to go back to my timeline here and make sure I haven't skipped anything. Ooh, I skipped a cool one. All right, well, I'm not going back to it. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is create some data to go with this. So one of the things that we like to do, I'm actually going to go in here a different way this time. We're going to go in a level above the apps. Hang on a second. Fine, I'll do it on the home page. There we go. So now we're a level above the apps and we can see the zones we're in. These are the IDs for the zones. So there's the content app. Here's my logo demo app, which is ID number 5, zone number 5. So I'm going to go down into the content app. And one of the things that's pretty neat about these logos is they basically have the same data type as the content app's link. So lately we've been learning that it's nice not to reinvent the wheel or rethink things. And one of the things that becomes an advantage is you can get used to what the names of these fields are, and it can make your coding go much faster because you just know them on the fly. So what we're going to do right now is take the link data type, and we're probably only going to use two fields, the image field itself, and actually that's probably about it, but I'm still going to use it. We're going to export the content type, and notice it's sitting right here in the bottom of my browser. And we're going to come out of here. We're going to go back into our logo demo. So now we've moved from the content app into our app. Go to views. I'm sorry, go to data. And now I'm going to import the content type, and I can, this is a weird one. Did you know you can pick this up and drop it right in there? And boom, I now have an empty link content type identical to the content app with all these fields. And now I'm just going to go create the first demo item, which we'll need. So we're going to be clear about that. We're going to name it demo item. And I'm going to make it really obvious it's a demo item by putting my favorite goofy demo picture in there. Where'd it go? There she is. There. That's a friend of mine's kid. And that's going to become our demo item.
Oh, everybody with me now. Come on.
Thank you. Thank you. Very
Aww.
nice. All right. So now we go back to the view that we made. And we now have a content type. The first thing I did is I skipped a step. So we're going to go back to the data. One of the things we do that I think also helps a lot is if we use the link content type or an existing one that we've made as it is, we leave the name the same. If we change it, so in this case, I actually know ahead of time that I'm going to want an alt tag to put on these images to make them more legal. So I'm going to save that. And now that I've changed it, I'm going to come in here and rename it. And we follow the same standard and just call it link plus for now. So now I have a content type named link plus, and that tells me when I see this in our different projects that it started life as a link content type, and we probably got some fields added. So now in view, logos, link plus, there's my demo item. Make sure list is on because I'm always forgetting that damn checkbox. Now we can come back here, get onto our logo demo page, hit refresh, and nothing's changed. So now we're going to go back to the code and we're going to start looking at the list items which we left in place. And because we're going to put them inside a repeater, we don't need two, we only need one. So basically the way we look at most things when you're inside a module, there's normally a header area, you know, a before if you're to Easy DNN News, and a repeater area, and then a footer area or an after for the EDN folks. Let's see, header, footer. One of the things I just wanted to show you is that app path token has an equivalent in Razor. So now it's .app with path, and Razor's smart enough to immediately switch with the slash. So if you refresh, we'll now see one item, and the app path should, if I have the folder in the right place, there's the Harvard logo from down here, and it mapped correctly because we use that variable, but we're not actually going to use that variable. So here's what we're actually going to do is we're going to take, notice we are in a, hang on. Sorry, I got to have this page on the page or it's not human, so. Okay, so here is our for each loop. And we're going to wrap that around the LI, stay in place. So very simply, as list is doing some work to give us the nice naming conventions, so I can say logo. Notice I'm for each var logo, and then the as list gives me the naming so that it knows to pull from the content type the fields. And I know because I'm used to this one that it's called image, but just to show you real quick, if you jump in here and take a look at your content type and look at the fields, the image field is where we drag and dropped that image to. So now, let's see, logo in. I'm just doing this for something I want to demo later. That's just so we'll be able to see the difference between things. So now we have this hooked up correctly. And you'll notice when I refresh, Harvard vanishes and a little kid appears. And all our CSS is in place. So one of the things I'm going to do first is go get rid of that background. Is that going to work? There, much nicer. Oop, I did that. Okay, so now just a quick demo to talk through what's going on here. There are no content items in here. There's no structured content yet. What you're seeing is a view in TooSexy using Razor. And because there's no items, it's being polite and giving you the demo item, which we got to specify. Notice I'm not getting any TooSexy buttons. That's because we need to add this thing over here, which I haven't copied yet. Where'd it go? Well, never mind. I don't need to copy it because I can type it. So on the LI, for example, or you could do it on the A, it probably doesn't matter much, but you just do A edit.tag, oops, toolbar. And so that's an edit object in TooSexy. It has a method called tag toolbar, and we're going to pass it in.
Outside the quotes.
Sorry?
Edit toolbar is
no,
outside
actually,
the tool. It is.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. I didn't see that move over. Perfect. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right. So now, when we hover, we get our stuff. And because we told it it's a list, two things to notice right now. Because we told it it's a list, and because we're doing just the data the way it's passed in, we're getting what's called the default stream from the data. So it knows what to do with that, and that's why we get this set of buttons. And what's really interesting here is now you get into the concept of blocks. And for people who haven't used Drupal, this tends to be a struggle at first, but most people pick up on it pretty quickly. You can start adding empty blocks, and notice all of these still have the demo item, even though there's actually no content here yet, but we have 3 empty slots to put content into. If I click on this middle one and hit edit, and I type NBA, go to the images, I have a bunch of those logos loaded here. So there's the NBA one. So now the middle one's the NBA one. That's the only piece of content in here so far. And what I mean by that, and it's really important to understand, is that if you go back to your data and open up the link plus, we now have a new item for NBA, but the demo item is still here. And what's going on with these blocks is TooSexy has linked this center block to that content item. And then that gets even more interesting after you do a few more of them. So let's go with yes and Gotta love that logo.
Absolutely do.
So now we can now we can start moving these around. So I'm moving the block. So if I want yes in the first place, that moves it over here, and that content item, that item is in the first block now. And the second one just has a demo item. What's really interesting, what I think gets really interesting is now, since I have two content items in my content type, I can add an existing one, and I'm going to add yes again. Now this time I'm going to go and replace this one, not add, with NBA. Okay, so we have no demo item showing anymore. What I really want to point out here is, let's put these side by side so you can see more easily. Notice the two yes ones if I inspect. Remember before I typed in the alt tag? So the entity ID is in here. If I go down to the one next to it, notice 1195 and 1195, it's the same piece of content, but it's appearing twice because it's assigned to two separate blocks. So if you're not used to this, play around with it. It's one of those things that's hard to teach, and most people just play with it enough and then the light bulb goes off and then they have a hard time explaining it to people, which is cool. So let's do the next cool thing here. Oops, I was supposed to leave one of those as a demo item. Here we go. So now we're going to add back the demo item. And one of the things, now let's skip ahead. Only other thing worth mentioning here is if you were to remove one of these and do it again and remove another one, you've removed the block, you have not removed the content. So if we go back to our data, there's still a demo item, one NBA and one yes. And you can see the stats here. You can see the two NBAs are in use somewhere, and there's no yes ones in use. All right, I'm going to try a little harder to follow my routine here because this is newer territory. All right, so for people who aren't used to the blocks, another way to approach this is, what if I have a bigger list of items? So I'm going to real quick, well, I hope real quick, I'm going to import some records in here that I have sitting around. And those are right here. No, here. Preview. All right, so I've got 14 content items. That looks good enough. I'm going to do the import, close. And now I've got 17 because we did not overlap any. So if you look in here, I do have NBA twice. So I'm going to go delete the duplicates. And we have a duplicate yes. We're going to get rid of that. Just to get those out of the way. Now here's an interesting thing. Can you guess what happens? Oh, there it is. Since I deleted the item that was hooked into the block, it went back to the demo item. 2sexy is really smart about that stuff. You would expect it to throw an error. It does not. All right, so now, since we've been talking about blocks, what happens when we switch this concept and say, I have 14 items in this database. How do I just get them all on the page? And 2sexy does a wonderful job at that. What you're doing is you, instead of the default data stream, you go up to the app, basically yourself, you are an app. And then you go data. And now this is the collection of streams. It's sort of an array. I don't think it's actually an array. But anyhow, you still access it like this. So all I'm putting in here is the content type name that you saw me give it earlier. And you'll notice, refresh. And I've got all of the items. It's a little bit weird that I have this one in. Oh, I know why. I didn't delete the third duplicate. Oops.
Mhm.
There we go. We have 2 demo items. And refresh. So now we still know that's a demo item. And so quite often we will code around that because we'll use content the block way, and we'll also elsewhere use the content in lists. So I've gone in here and I've got my entity ID of 1191, and we'll actually hard code it so that I'm going to rearrange this a little bit so it makes me happier. Put this down here, and now I can go dot where. Entity ID is not equal to, I forgot already, was that what it was?
9.5? 9.8? 6? No, I don't remember.
1191. That's weird. I never get those things right. I actually believed you were more on track than me. All right, save. And now just this one should vanish, or I'll get an error. But I should be okay.
Here we
Boom. So now we have 13 items, 1 down the middle. And we could also start doing stuff like order by, if you guys are familiar with your link fun. And we're just going to order by the title field, save. And now, obviously, yes should be last. There it is. And the acute brackets is first. And for those of you who do this all the time, you probably know that descending is the opposite. Now we'll have yes first. But anyhow, the way you paint that list is what you're displaying. So let me get that here. All right, so we have 2 different ways to get structured content on the page, and we started with an article by somebody else with plain HTML. And it's really cool to point out that if you really look at this, other than the styling that we did, which is mostly from the article, this is your whole app. And you can now, I'm going to get rid of this. That is not a lot of code for a lot of very clean output benefit, including handling transparent images for you.
Mm-hmm.
How am I doing on time?
We need to be wrapping up pretty soon here. Some of us have been working constantly and haven't even eaten lunch or much breakfast. So we're going to pass out in a second if we don't eat. But Jeremy, I was going to kind of bring some of those ideas together just like you did, because we started here with a demo idea, and you use this as an example to show how you do structured content in 260 with something that's fairly common. Like that article says, making a logo list is a very common task, and you kind of stepped us through it. I'm taking notes that we'll put up in the article that we put on the website, and I made a link over to the media blends type of styles as well. So anybody who wants to see all the different things you can do, I've got some extra stuff there for you. But along the way here, Jeremy, what else did you want to show us? This looks pretty sharp.
I just want to show off a couple of features real quick that people aren't commonly aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel finally worked this one out. Let me test it and make sure in this version it's working the way it's supposed to nowadays. Up here on the right, you've got this status show hide. And the original idea was having publish and draft and be able to hide individual content items. And it's kind of come full circle. And I'm now setting status to hide on the Massachusetts one. Notice I can still see it. That's because I'm an editor and I'm logged in and I need to edit. If I go to the public facing, notice it's missing. So you have a fantastic user feature in place where in just a few seconds, you can go edit, status, hide, save. And so there, gone. So these are features that are built in. People don't realize they're there. And what's also nice is they're exposed in the UI too. For example, I'm just going to throw this on screen. Inside the LI, I'm just going to add a little pre-tag and show you that there's an is published, which is a true false. So now we're going to ugly things up and just get a little debug code on screen. So you'll now see status false, status true, status false. And also, did anyone notice that as I hover on these, there's a new icon here? Notice that says unpublished. So anyhow, I wanted to encourage people to use these features once you see and understand them. I've got a couple of park districts doing this all the time, and they really love this convenience of diving into something with a whole bunch of things on screen and hiding one and then bringing it back the next season. It also works great for when you got 14 things to show and you only got room for 4 of them and you want to rotate them every 3 months. You do all kinds of cool stuff. Also, watch what happens when I click this button. It's actually an active button and it switched it to true. So to take that a really silly step further, just going to show you one little piece of coolness. We're going to get rid of that output. And then on the image tag, I'm going to rearrange things so it's more readable to old people like me. And I'm going to put the end tag down here. Usually when there's a lot of stuff, I break out all of my HTML like this nowadays. And so I'm putting a style in place. And I'm using logo.isPublish, which we know is a true or false. And when it's true, I'm doing nothing.
Yeah, you're graying it out basically if it's not.
Yeah. So watch this. Now you're going to see the NBA one now is blurred and grayed. I mean, so it's really visually interactive, and it just makes these interfaces really easy to use and joyful and understand without. One of the big things we've noticed here is we used to schedule most projects for 1 and 2 hours of multi-session training. And nowadays, people are like kicking us, stopping us from training after 15 minutes. They're like, let us get to work, we get it. And that's a huge testament to DNN itself, to Sexy, and just the way we all get to work nowadays. All right, let me see if I had anything else that I'm just gonna feel bad for not showing you. All right, I'm gonna show you one last thing, and this is gonna go really fast. It's more of a tease. One of the things we do is we do a lot of repetitive stuff, and the UI for Too Sexy bugs us because there's a lot of situations where adding an item is just not convenient or not. Notice in this case, adding an item's not even there by default. So we have our old, this is an old project, but we have our old button components, and we map to it. It's a CS file that gets compiled into a library. It's compile time, which is why I had to point out in the beginning that we're using the newer code DOM, because there's a lot of string interpolation in there. But notice the simplicity of get a handle on my object, pass it some defaults, and now I'm giving it a label, an icon. BS means bootstrap, so we're actually using bootstrap colors. Anyone who knows Too Sexy well knows what content items does. It's going to jump you straight to the screen where you edit the link plus content type. So With that amount of work you see on screen, I hit save, refresh, and I now have 2 ta-da, nice looking buttons with icons. And notice where this one takes me in 1 click. I'm inside all the data, and you can clearly see the ones that are hidden. And I can go in and edit them. Let's take Acuity and hide that one just to show you. Save, close. And now Acuity is gray and blurred. If I want to add a new one, I now have a clean button right in front of the user. And again, you can tell these are Bootstrap buttons, and we built our tools around Bootstrap originally. We're in the process of converting these to web components. So hopefully in a few months, I'll get to demo that, because it's really exciting to see them working as web components. That's coming soon. But so far, the only component that's working is a button with 2 options, but we're getting there. Yeah, and we're also stripping it of Bootstrap reliance, so it'll be just completely standalone dependency. Okay, so anyhow, that last part, I think for this small amount of code while you're working on a project with very clear labeling, there's a lot of return on investment in there, and we get to reuse this type of stuff a lot. So any questions?
I will take a look through the chat and see if there are things to throw in there. You've got praise and thank yous. You've got bravo, wow, and nobody puts accuracy in the corner.
That's cool.
Let's see. Do we have questions? No, there was
we
some
do.
points from
Alessandra
earlier when
was
you were
asking
doing
what.
code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's what the Here's
XML.
what the JSON looks like that I imported real quickly, just so you can see it. Actually, no, that's no fun. Let's see, where's the XML? The XML is.
Yeah, because sometimes
here.
there's a bunch of stuff and adding them one by one, I go like, seriously, this is, yeah, I can't.
Yeah. So there's the XML version that let me export and import those items really quick. Very
That's
readable.
cool.
In some cases, I've even come in here and hand edited or deleted the GUIDs to prevent some collisions. You learn what works and doesn't after a while. It's very nice, very easy to play with.
Nice, thank you.
Aaron had a question earlier, just curiosity about how often you customize that edit tag toolbar. And you kind of touched on that here with talking about how you appreciate sometimes you have those menu items available, but if you don't, you make your own for the primaries, right?
Yeah. But we have a lot of button options, and we tend to lean towards those more. I find the Too Sexy UI itself to be a little bit odd in certain ways. And sometimes you just need a damn button in front of you to do something. So here's the full set of components, and it's pretty interesting. We have a ton of properties you can pass in, and it gets really advanced. You can do icon buttons, you can do stuff that giant round buttons, you can do items that go in front and behind each other, and I don't know. It's interesting building these, but this one's a couple of years old now, but we still use it a bit. I'm trying really hard to get the web components version in place so that we stop using it.
That'd be interesting if that one was public. You share it, you'd find a bunch of people using it too.
Yeah, that scares me, because then they'd ask me questions and I'd go fix it and make it better, and suddenly hours go by.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, everyone, I'm not sure if we still have David here with us. He needed to step out real quick, so we'll throw a shout out his way if he's able to still say hi. But we need to say thank you, Jeremy, for an excellent presentation. I know that taking a look at this was a deep dive into Too Sexy, and my favorite part about it was seeing the way you think and the way you go through and process things. I really think that both of those two presentations did that from different starting points. With Aaron talking about how he starts off in HTML and then he goes and he brings things and he figures things out in Too Sexy and sets up his Tailwind that way. Jeremy basically walked through doing that same thing as an example. That's kind of the way I approach things too. So I really resonate with the way that was approached, and that was a lot of fun. So thank you very much, Jeremy. A big round of applause for you.
Welcome.
We're
Thank you.
wrapping up here. It's 8:40, so it's just a little bit after time where we normally like to shoot for, but we're in really good shape. So here, this is the end of our October Southern Fried DNN User Group meeting. We have our next meeting in November, and that will be November the 18th, the third Thursday of the month. Remember too that we are doing that alternating timeline. So next Thursday's November the 18th meeting will be in the afternoon, and that is 3:30 Eastern time. So we will see everyone during the daytime for our next Southern Fried DNN User Group meeting. And I'm going to check to see if I have the controls, or Clint, do you have the controls? Are you able to pause and we'll finish the recording here at this point?